Hi, Guy. Thanks for joining us. Just do you want to start by just telling us where you grew up and how you got into filmmaking?
Hey, thanks, Roy. Thanks for having me and doing this. Yeah, I actually grew up north of Orlando, Florida. Um, I got into filmmaking in the production world kind of by happenstance. I was working at a company. They needed somebody to help on a shoot. I was in a different division, and they just kind of picked me at random. And next thing I know, I'm working on a commercial production for a travel company, and the spokesperson was Evil Knievel, and that was like I was just thrown in as a PA, and that was the first time I really saw what film and television was all about. Took it from being out in Hollywood and kind of made it a real tangible thing. And from there, I said, wow, I met the DP and talked to the director and a few of the other crew, and realized that that was something that you actually do. It wasn't just a thing out in Hollywood, especially as a youngster in my teens. So from there, I talked to the guy that I was working for, and he suggested I go to the school I was at, see if they had any film or video program or classes, and they did. I signed up. I did really well with that, and next thing I know, there's literally in the same office building a post-production company opened up. So I walked over there and introduced myself, and next thing I know, a year later, I'm basically a manager of that business. And then from there, I got into post-production heavily, and then finally took the step into doing camera work and DP work. So that's kind of the beginnings of it. Was mostly corporate production, commercial production, television type work. And then over the years, over my career, it's gone into a lot of different avenues. But that's kind of how it got started early on.
Yeah, so did you grow up around cars when you were a kid?
So I did not grow up around cars as a kid. When I was young, for some reason, I was into Hot Wheels and Matchboxes as a youngster. I remember finding like a Cherry Bomb 57 Chevy under my grandmother's stove at a house she'd moved into, and I thought that was the coolest thing. Always getting different gifts that were car related. I was always playing with the tracks and things like that. That grew into Corgi cars, which were a little bit bigger and more collectible. And then somewhere along the way, someone in my family got me a Road and Track subscription. So when that came every month, I'd read that cover to cover. And for Christmas one year, because we lived in kind of out in no man's land, my parents bought me a go-kart, and that kind of that was all I ever did was I just drove around the neighborhood constantly. So I think I was probably influenced a lot by Hollywood. I can remember one of the first films I ever saw was Herbie the Love Bug, and I thought it was cool that a car was the character and did all these cool tricks. And then as a child of the late 70s and early 80s, you had a lot of films that had cars in them. So, you could go, I could reference the Cannonball movies, Smokey and the Bandit. You've got, with television, you've got shows, at like Knight Rider and the A-Team with, Face's Corvette and, BA's van. So they did a good job of incorporating cars into as characters almost into the Hollywood world. And so that's, I think, kind of what germinated my interest in cars and the car hobby.
Cool. And what was your first job that wasn't film related? Like when you were a kid, when you first got a
My first job was bagging groceries because my parents said if you want a car, you have to get a job and pay for insurance. I thought it was fine them just driving me around everywhere, but apparently they didn't like that so much. And then it was actually my second and third jobs that kind of put me in a different path. I mean, the interesting job that I got while I was in high school bagging groceries was there wasn't enough parking at my high school, so a friend of the family's lived kind of adjacent to the school, and I went to him and said, "Hey, do you mind if I park it in your driveway a couple of days a week so I can get to work on time?" And he said, "Sure." So one day after school, I'm over getting my car, and I hear some noise around the back of his house, and he's got this long house with a 3-car garage around the back, and I go back there and it's dark, and as I walk in, it's like a Hollywood shot where you walk in, your eyes adjust, and then before me is this Porsche 911 slant nose, and my jaw kind of hit the ground, and that was the first time that cool cars were real and tangible, right there in front of me. And so I chatted with him. Turns out one of his businesses was buying and selling and fixing up cars. They didn't make car shows or TV shows about folks like that like they do today, but that's what he did. And so next thing I know, I'm hanging out with him, going around buying cars, selling cars, and doing that kind of thing. So that's kind of another big piece of the puzzle for the car bug.
Cool. And what's the story behind the film competition? How did that start?
So a lot of my work led me to automotive content. There's a Concours d'Elegance here, and when it first was in its early stages, I went to them after seeing some classic cars go down the road, which you're not used to seeing. So I went to them and I pitched them the idea of doing promotional work, promotional pieces for commercial purposes and for sponsor purposes, and they hired me, and that kind of got me in that door. And once I got into that world, I started going to other car shows in the region, and actually, been to Europe and to Canada to car shows, doing work or supporting car shows through my video and film production. And I met a lot of people. A retired CBS producer that I met had interest in doing a TV show. We kind of worked on that for a while. It didn't really go anywhere, but while we were working on it, I was able to meet a lot of people with interesting cars as we were casting potential stories. And I made a friend with a guy that has an ISO Grifo, which is one of 412 cars that were made, and he had an interesting story. It was an interesting car, and it turns out he knew a lot about the marque, more than most people. And so we finally agreed, hey, let's do a short piece about your car. And the intention was like a 4 or 5 minute piece, and then once we got into it, I quickly realized that there was a lot more, and we ended up doing the piece ended up being 20 minutes. And with that piece, we wanted to show it off to our friends, and we thought, hey, a good place to do that would be, when the Concours is in town here, all of our friends are coming for that event, so we'll show it to them. So I rented a movie theater, and we thought, hey, 20 minutes is kind of a short film for running a movie theater and all that expense. So we booked in a couple other short films, reached out to some manufacturers and filmmakers to get a couple other short films, and then reached out to Adam Carolla's team, and we booked the film about Paul Newman, winning the racing life of Paul Newman. And so we kind of made it like a little mini movie night film festival. We had heavy hors d'oeuvres and a bar and red carpet and all that kind of stuff. And we invited 150 of our closest friends in the car world, and everyone had a good time. A lot of great feedback. And on the way out, everyone was saying, "Hey, you guys should do this again next year. This was a lot of fun." And we kind of looked at each other and okay, and that was kind of like the beginning of it. And then quickly, so we did it a couple of years, and as we were doing it for a few years, and I've been to film festivals, and the idea came, well, maybe we could turn this into a festival where, people can send their films, and we can have an opportunity to share them with our audience that we have. And then we were ready to pull the trigger, and that virus thing that affected the world kind of put us on our heels and delayed us a couple of years. But finally, we were able to pull the trigger a couple of years ago, and we weren't sure what kind of, what the reaction would be, and it more than exceeded our expectations. So that's why we're in our 7th year now as an event whole. This is our 2nd year doing the actual festival component with folks entering their films. So that's kind of how that started, was looking for a platform to share our work, and then realizing this is a cool platform. There are enthusiasts out there who like seeing this content, especially on a big screen versus just on your laptop or your iPhone. So it's interesting to see the community of film fans, as we call them, that get excited about seeing this content in the theater environment. And then of course The filmmakers, it's a side effect that we weren't really expecting, but the folks who, filmmakers like ourselves, you get them in a room and they've never met each other and they're watching others work and they're becoming friends, and so it's kind of developed a community. Here we are on our second year, and a lot of the filmmakers are become friends having met at our events. So that's kind of a neat spin-off effect of the event.
Filmmakers, like new filmmakers, they probably never been in a room with like an audience watching their project. So by holding like this film festival, it gives them a chance to kind of see like reactions from the crowd and, watch cinema in the way that it's made for, like on a big screen in front of people. Because, you put it on YouTube and you might get some likes and comments, but you never really know like how people are responding. So for people who want to enter their film into this kind of festival, what categories have you got, and how have you like broken it down?
So the categories are broken into documentary and narrative, and there's short and feature length, subsets of those categories. Depending on the number of films we get that are under 10 minutes, we might actually create a third category, so that there's so many good films that are 3 minutes, and there's a lot of films that are good that are 25 minutes. So if we have enough, we might break that into separate categories, so we can properly, acknowledge, the shorter films versus those mid-lengths. And then we have a brand and image, which is, so let's say you're a brand and you're doing a promotional piece for your tires or something. So obviously that's going to have a slightly different narrative to it than you would a documentary or a true narrative film. So that's kind of its own separate category. And then we have it's called factual entertainment, which is in journalism, which is kind of, if you're doing content for YouTube, maybe you're reviewing a car, or maybe it's a television segment, that would fall into that category, and there's no time limit on that one. And the last category, which is actually I think our most popular category last year, was the student film category. We had student films, for example, that rivaled professional work. It was pretty amazing. So to kind of add to the point of new filmmakers being able to experience their films in the big screen with an audience, it's really neat to be able to show the student work and see people's reactions, because I don't think a lot of people, the general audience, has high expectations for student films. But I gotta tell you, there's some really great work coming out of students. So professionals need to watch out. So the 250 GTO film, which it's interesting because there were other films that were more narrative in the student category that, and I don't take part of the judging process. We have our judges for that, and I'm more of a story guy. So I would have thought that the narrative piece would have kind of percolated a little bit higher to the top. But this 250 GTO, I kind of likened it to Top Gear of the past, where they do these really great montages of cars when they're doing test drives. In car, multiple angles, gear shifter, steering wheel, the pedals, the driver, wide shot of the car of it drifting. They have all the exterior cameras and then the track cameras, and then the sound design was it was awesome. And to see that again on a big screen in a big theater with the sound system versus only seeing it on a flat screen, that was a very powerful film in person on the big screen. I got to tell you, it was very impressive. Because what a lot of people may not realize, filmmakers get this, when you're dealing with a 40-foot canvas versus thinking of just shooting something for television, I don't know that a lot of people are thinking in the 40-foot realm, and how the eye moves back and forth across the screen at that point versus just looking at a small screen or a flat screen TV where you kind of take everything in at once. That dynamic just is so powerful, and that's you can tell it gets me excited.
Cool. And you mentioned there's judges. Like, how did the judging work? Like, what kind of things are they looking for when they're doing their judging?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's kind of a two parts to the judging. The first is more kind of a line item, and everything's kind of judged on a scale. And they'll look at specific things like cinematography, writing, the editing, if there's actors, the acting, sound design, use of music, kind of more of the technical things that go into creating content. And then the next part is more story based. Is there a beginning, middle, and end? Is the story, does it make sense? Is there, is the goal or the objective of the piece, is it clear and is it met? Those types of things. And then that's interesting because a lot of the judges start making comments, and they have stronger opinions about that side of things. And that's kind of the two main parts. I won't tell you exactly how they, there's a few little things that, the secret sauce that they like to look at. But I think it's fairly straightforward which films are going to kind of come to the top. But then, like last year, for example, we had one category, we had a tie. And I sent out and said, all right, well, we need a tiebreaker. And then it came back and it was still a tie. So we had to go a few rounds to break that tiebreaker. So the level of work, and the judges don't have an easy job, I can tell you that. So we have one film that's an Independent Achievement Award. So if someone makes a film and it's basically a no budget type of a project, a passion project, we feel it's important to recognize those films and those filmmakers because that's probably them starting out, and if they're biting off a big chunk and kind of beg borrowing and stealing kind of a thing, it's almost like a student film in one sense. So those types of films we might recognize. And then we have another one called The Spirit of Motoring, which, being so connected to the car hobby, we want to make sure that we recognize a film that promotes the car hobby or is promoting the history of the automobile to a new audience. So those are two kind of awards that we're going to keep looking to. Right, I don't know if it's awards or more of a recognition.
And then what kind of like run times are there? Like, so if somebody has like a 5-minute film, or if they have like a 1 minute or a 30-second film, like what kind of time frame are you looking for?
So the short films are, and I think we're saying anything short's 29 minutes or less. Anything longer than that would fall in the feature category. But we're very aware of there's a lot of work that's 2 to 5 minutes or less, especially with our short attention span society that we're in. If we have enough films come in that are of that shorter length, we're looking at opening that up to its own super short category, if you will. But right now, I'm not sure what the entry numbers are on that. But that's something that we're looking at. But typically any length, but 30 minutes or less would be considered short. Anything longer than that, I think, falls into the feature. The specifics are listed on the website for those who want to really dive into that.
What are the dates? Like, what are the deadlines to get your film submitted? And then when is the festival itself?
So the next deadline is the middle of August. I think it's August 15, and I think there's the extended late, I forget what it's called, but the last final deadline is August 30. And then the event is November 2 and 3 this year. And the cutoff date, a lot of people want it, hey, can we submit it later? The challenge is we have to get through the judging, figure out who, kind of the finalists are, and then let everyone know so that if the finalists want to come, we want to give folks enough lead time to be able to figure out the travel plans. So that's kind of why there's that window between, the end of August and November. So the event November 2 and 3. So our big night is Thursday, November 2, and we call that our showcase event. And that starts off with we'll have 40 cars, classic cars and collector cars outside of the theater that we're at. We have heavy hors d'oeuvres. We've got 2 or 3 bars. We have some sponsor exhibits there. It's the opening night of a film festival, if you will, and we roll in our awards program into that night. And that once we go from the reception, the filmmaker reception, into the theater, we typically will show a handful of short films, and then after that, and that kind of gets the audience kind of in the groove and juiced up. Then we do our awards program, like the Emmys, if you will. The nominations are the winner, and we hand out the trophies there on stage, and then to finish the night, we have one headliner film. And last year that was it's funny, we've done some of these events, and I've done at other venues too. The headliner film will almost draw in its own audience, which is kind of cool. But last year we showed Blink of an Eye, which was about Dale Earnhardt and Michael Waltrip's relationship, and how Waltrip kind of navigated his first win in NASCAR and the repercussions of Earnhardt's death. So, and then from there, we typically will have a filmmaker Q&A. So the short films, we'll have a Q&A with the filmmakers, and then after the feature film or the headliner film, typically a producer or someone who was featured in the film will show up. So a couple examples on that are a couple years ago we did an event with and Hurley Haywood we showed Hurley's film. Hurley came. Brumo sent his 91710. We had that on stage. So we showed his film and we did a nice, Q&A. And that's actually something the audience really, really likes. But we have to cut it off at some point. So the next day, after we recover from that night, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Friday, and those hours might change a little bit depending on the films, then we move to another theater, and we show as many or all of the finalist films as we can in 2-hour blocks. So the format is we'll show a couple short films and then a feature or semi-feature length films to make 2-hour blocks of films. Any of the filmmakers who are there, we'll do Q&A panel discussions with them. And so we'll do 3 blocks, maybe 4 on Friday, and depending on the number of films, we might actually have to use 2 locations, and that's still to be determined. But I got to say, it's the interaction with the audience. We've got a lot of petrol heads and car people that are car enthusiasts in our audiences, and that really bodes well for the filmmakers, because not only you go to a standard film festival, they'll ask you about the technical or story questions, but our Q&As they want to know more specifics about certain cars that were used, or how did you shoot this car, or, where was this shot at. So it's kind of interesting. It's a bit more of an engaged Q&A than I think you might get at an average film festival. So that's the 2 days, and we'll probably do like a wrap dinner on Friday night for the filmmakers somewhere, but it's, we still have some time to get to that before we make those announcements. So that's kind of the 2-day bubble. And here's the cool part. Anyone who has the film that's shown, and they come for our event, we'll comp each filmmaker 2 tickets to the Concours, the Elegance, which is Saturday and Sunday. So that's kind of another little thing we like to throw in to entice our filmmakers to join us.
Cool. And for the audience, like, you don't have to be like a car person to go and enjoy these films. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of people that bring their wives along.
Yeah, I know we've had a good event when the spouses stop and compliment on how great the film selections were and how much they enjoyed it. It's definitely, I'd say, 80 to 90% of the audience are couples. In fact, one of my friends, he was telling me just a few weeks ago, his wife was like, "Why do I have to go to this car thing? I'm not that into it." Well, she got there and she saw the films and she realized, which you and I know, is cars are a vehicle, right? The story with Waltrip, it was more about his personal relationship with Dale Earnhardt. It just so happens that they race cars for a living, and that was the backdrop. Or a couple of the projects I've done about a car was about the family's connection, why they had this bond and relationship, or how a father and son's relationship was positively impacted because they shared, an interest in a car, and that was the bond for the father and son. You realize that the stories are personal, they're human interactions, and I think that's what a lot of people who aren't really sure what they're getting into and they walk away from it, they appreciate that. Yeah, yes, the theme is about cars and the car culture, but ultimately it's personal stories that really resonate, and they're there.
From starting this film festival, how have you found like the automotive and the filmmaking community come together?
there's more of an automotive filmmaking community than I realized. That's the first thing. There are guys, and I speak for myself too. Like if all I could do was automotive content and car content, that would be great for me. I much prefer that over some of the other work that I do. But that being said, there's car guys that make films, and there's just general filmmakers who just happen to work in that space. And what I found is most of the people that came last year were all car enthusiasts at some level, or a racing enthusiast, or they had some connection to the car hobby one way or another. And that's, I mean, that kind of energy. The filmmakers, we had I think 12 to 14 filmmakers representing the 20 films that we showed last year. It was amazing to see, people have never met each other, live in different parts of the country or from Europe, and they meet each other and they hit it off. And a lot of the filmmakers have stayed in touch. On social media, I see a lot of them, interacting with each other still. In fact, there was an event in California where one filmmaker was showing her new film, and one of the other filmmakers that she had met at our event just happened to be in LA at the same time, so she went to it. So it's kind of fostering this community a little bit, which is not something that was really in the mindset starting out, but it's really neat to see that. And then it's also neat because then there's someone else that if you have a question as a filmmaker or you're trying to figure something out, you have someone in your network that you didn't have before, which has always been handy for me, to be able to, hey, I can reach out to someone and get some help or some insights.
Awesome. So I'll put a link in the description with your website and how can people enter their films, and how can they, if they're the audience, how can they buy a ticket to attend?
Good question. So the main portal for everything is grandmotoring.com, which is our main website. And once you're there, you can go into the filmmakers section and submit your film, and that takes you to filmfreeway.com/Grand Motoring Film Festival. And that's a platform that we use. It's pretty standard. Most people that have done a film festival in the last couple of years have used that platform. You upload your film there, and on the back end, it allows our judges to be able to do everything they need to do. If you want to get tickets, right now we have VIP passes available right now through our website, grandmotoring.com, and then our general admission tickets go on sale, I want to say September 6th. So if you don't want the VIP tickets, you got to wait till the 6th. You have to sign up for the newsletter, and then we actually, anyone who's on the newsletter e-blast will get first dibs on when the tickets get released. They'll have a few days ahead of time to be able to get tickets. On Friday, we don't actually charge admission, but we do ask for a donation to charity. One of our main charity this year is called Tools for Techs, and it's a program where starter toolkits are provided to kids in community college and automotive tech programs. So instead of like a scholarship that comes and goes, they get a Snap-on toolkit starter kit, and that's something those folks are going to use potentially for the rest of their careers. So that's where those donations are going to go to support that. And that's it. Everything's online. It's great.
It seems like it's a great community event, and I look forward to seeing how it turns out.
Thanks, Rory. I appreciate the time, and thanks for the opportunity to share our event. Anyone has any questions, they can reach me through the website or social media. Happy to help out.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Guy. It was great to hear a little bit about your backstory and how you got this film festival started.
Thanks so much for having me.
No worries.
Go, 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 go.